Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today in Thun, Switzerland, visiting B&T. We're taking a look today at their APC-9. That is the Advanced Police Carbine, originally 9mm. Now, this was developed starting in 2010, essentially because Karl Brügger, who owns and runs the company, was a huge MP5 fan and thought it'd be really cool to come up with a gun that could compete with and replace the MP5. So at this point, B&T had some experience manufacturing guns. They'd been doing, well, they bought the MP9/TP9 project from Steyr, improved it, manufactured it themselves. It was selling well as both a civilian semi-auto gun and as a military and police machine pistol. They also had a bunch of experience making handguards, stocks, accessories, basically modernizing other guns on the market, including, to a large extent, the MP5. There were a lot of agencies and individuals out there who had MP5s, classic original MP5s, and wanted to modernize them with adjustable stocks, folding stocks, railed handguards, all sorts of accessories. And B&T was a big part of that business. So you put this all together and you have the idea of, look, we know how to modernize, we know how to make guns. We, and by we, I mean Karl Brügger, love shooting 9mm carbines. Let's just make our own and make it the best possible one we could. That's the genesis of the APC-9. So Brügger first sketches this thing out basically on his kitchen table in 2010. In 2011, they start developing it at an engineering level. And the concept is it needs to be modern in handling. It needs to have fully ambidextrous controls. In this case, I love the fact that Karl Brügger is also a left-handed shooter and so actually pays attention to fully ambidextrous controls on guns like this. And it also has to be simple. It has to be simple to manufacture and inexpensive to manufacture because it's being made in Switzerland, where labor costs are like the highest of anywhere on the planet. And so they come up with a number of really cool engineering solutions here that lead to an efficient gun and an extremely modular gun. And start, like we have one of the very original versions here. There's a second generation that has some more bells and whistles. Why don't we go ahead and dive right in and let's start with the original guns. Like the very first, really the first major contract they got for these was with the Austrian Cobra unit. It's an anti-terrorist, it's a tier 1 Austrian anti-terrorist unit. And it was a pretty high profile contract for them to start using APC-9. So let's take a look at what they were using. All right, so what we have here is actually a really early first generation APC-9. If we look here on the side, the bolt and the receiver are both marked with a serial number. The leading two digits here, 11, indicate that this was made in 2011, which is the first year they were produced, and this is all of the 47th example made. On the other side, we have a Swiss cross on the receiver, and then the lower has the B&T's logo, the model designation, and of course, Swiss made. It's also worth pointing out here that the serialized component on the APC-9 is the upper receiver. The lower, which is also, by the way, polymer, is unserialized, it is interchangeable, and that is where the magazine, of course, is fitted. So the standard original APC-9s used the same magazine from the original Steyr TMP or SPP. B&T continued to use that in their MP9 TP9. I love all of these letter acronyms that all use the same letters. Anyway, it's a double stack, double feed, 9mm parabellum magazine. Standard is 30 rounds. They do also make some shorter variations of it. Now, in order to make this efficient and economical to produce, they opted to use extruded aluminum for the upper receiver. It's a really good idea. The FN SCAR does the same thing a few years later. The lower is molded polymer, and in fact on this early one, the pistol grip is integrated into that polymer lower. Let's go ahead and take this apart. We pull the two pins on the lower. There we go. That's going to come right off. Fire control assembly is in there. These are essentially AR parts. It does have a 45-degree safety. It's a little bit complicated in that this isn't necessarily completely interchangeable with any AR fire control group on the market, especially like cassette fire control groups. But these are AR-15 parts, so there is definitely some modularity capability there. We have a bolt hold open on the bottom of the trigger guard on this very early model. Originally, it was actually inside the trigger guard. They decided that was a bad idea and got rid of it. This is your bolt release, also ambidextrous. Safety, also ambidextrous, and a 45-degree throw. This is a semi-auto only one. So for a gun developed with the idea of competing with or replacing the MP5, having a closed bolt, hammer-fired system is really important because it gives you that capability for a really good, precise first shot or semi-auto single shot. So much better than an open bolt gun. And the one other element specifically here, this being developed, well, as the name implies, Advanced Police Carbine, one of the popular things that agencies don't like about the AR-15 is that you can't put the safety on if the hammer's down. So that's changed in more recent years, but the APC-9 was doing that from the very beginning. So safety can go on regardless of where the hammer is. Just to continue disassembly, we pop the stock down and it comes out. We have a hydraulic buffer here, which is a highly relevant feature, which I'll come back to in just a moment. We have a reciprocating charging handle, comes out, and then a bolt and a mainspring, and that is the whole gun field strip. So it comes apart very easily. Now let's talk about a couple of the design considerations here. It is simple blowback, so just based on the mass of the bolt. So when they put together the first prototypes, they didn't have the hydraulic buffer, and it was just a simple blowback action. And the problem with that was that it ran really, really fast, like 1,800 rounds a minute in full auto. That was obviously way too fast, used ammo too fast, it was not controllable. There needed to be a change to the design to make it, to reduce the felt recoil and reduce the rate of fire in the full auto versions. Now, one option would be to go to a delayed or locked breech system, but that adds a lot of complexity. And what Brügger decided to do instead was add a hydraulic buffer to the end of the stock. And this is basically an industrial standard oil hydraulic buffer. And by adding that in, it actually fixed both of these issues. Even though it's a simple blowback bolt, this hydraulic buffer takes essentially the energy out of that end of stroke of the bolt. It reduces the rate of fire down to somewhere in the range of 850 to maybe 1,000 rounds a minute. Being simple blowback, the rate of fire is also highly dependent on exactly what ammo you're using. So, you know, the difference between 115 grain plus P NATO versus 150 grain subsonic makes a big difference on your rate of fire. At any rate, what the hydraulic buffer does, the felt recoil impulse from almost any firearm really, you get primarily when the bolt impacts the back end of the receiver, it stops and the energy is transferred into the shooter's shoulder. The hydraulic buffer here dramatically slows down that transition and absorbs a lot of the energy in the buffer, thus reducing the felt recoil. And by doing that, I'm skipping forward here like to the next video we're going to do, but when the US Army trialed this in the shortened version, they tested the felt recoil in all of the different guns that were submitted, and despite being simple blowback, the APC-9 actually did extremely well in ratings on felt recoil, and that's because of that hydraulic buffer. Now, you may also be thinking that hydraulic buffers are going to be a significant wear item and, you know, highly fragile, and at some point you're going to fire it and it's going to go blorp and all the oil is going to spill out. Apparently, this not so much. There were problems in the initial design stage with the center rod in the buffer breaking eventually, so they went back and dramatically increased the material strength of that central rod. That appears to have solved the breaking issues. They have one gun that they actually bought back from a German rental range that had 150,000 rounds through it that still had a completely functional, undamaged hydraulic buffer. So that's impressive. To go back to our manufacturing methods here for a moment, this is the overall extrusion that they use on the gun. There's actually two, by the way. There's a full auto extrusion and a semi. The semi has an extra bit of material in the corner, so you can't put a full auto bolt into the semi-auto receiver extrusion. But by using this extrusion, well, let me back up a step. For those of you who aren't familiar with extrusions, the idea is you have a die with this profile on the end, right there, and you essentially squeeze aluminum into it, and it produces a long tube of aluminum with this exact profiles. So for the manufacturing, you take a 6 meter, a 20-foot long stick of this material, you cut off a gun length piece of it, and then you just have to machine the holes in it. So they will machine out the opening in the bottom, the charging handle slot, cut this angle. There are a lot of actually really pretty basic machining operations instead of having to take a solid block of aluminum and mill out everything on the inside. It's a manufacturing method that isn't always compatible. Like, you have to design a firearm specifically for extrusion use, but when you do, you can end up with something that's really modular and really efficient to make. There are 3 screws on each side here. These hold in the front trunnion. The barrel screws into that trunnion and is then held in place by a lock nut, which you can't really see down in there, but that's a pretty basic thing. They screw on a couple pieces of Picatinny rail on the side. The ejector is set here in the side. The ejector is made of steel because aluminum is not durable enough to act as an ejector. So that goes in. There's a pin holding it in place. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, on this early version, they of course machined the Picatinny rail into the top, and they also included integrated folding iron sights. That's a version. Well, I think actually Cobra didn't take the iron sights, but the original early APC-9s had these. The second major contract, by the way, was like 2016. It was 2,000 guns to the Slovakian police. They had the folding iron sights, and it was not that long after that Slovakian police sale that they went ahead and gave the whole platform sort of a facelift, and it came out as the APC-9 Pro. And here is one of the Pro models. Now, this is the K, so it's the short-barreled version, but it has a bunch of upgrades that they made around 2019. So if we pull off the pistol grip, you can see that the polymer mold is the same, except on the Pro, the pistol grip is now a separate element, and this is a 100% AR-15 compatible pistol grip. So on the second generation version, you can replace the pistol grip with any other AR pistol grip that you might prefer. That was something that a lot of customers requested. There is no longer a set of integrated iron sights on here. They were frankly kind of small, kind of flimsy, and a lot of customers just weren't interested in them, and they add to the cost of the gun. So those were removed. The charging handle is now dual-sided, although if you wanted to, you could pull off one of these handles, and folding and non-reciprocating. So the original guns had reciprocating charging handles. That's another thing that was not a big deal, and in some cases specifically preferred, and then sort of fashion shifted the other way. People much prefer non-reciprocating charging handles, and especially folding ones that stay out of the way. So that's, since 2019, that's the standard pattern. And there are now M-LOK slots underneath the Picatinny rail. So the rail can be removed, and you've got M-LOK under there if you want to use it for something else. The original versions, the early version had screwed on Picatinny rail, but if you took it off, you didn't have a usable alternative underneath. All right, rather than try and show you every single different modular item that they have for the APC-9, I thought it kind of gets the point across here by showing you like the big old chart of options that they have for their sales guys. So I'll show you a couple of these. Like the stocks are, you can have collapsing, very compact stocks, the sort of regular triangular side folding stock. We have a minimalist slimline folding stock, the full profile adjustable folding stock. You get the idea there. They've also come out with a number of different magazine wells for the guns. So the most distinctive one, of course, is for Glock magazines. But the one to me that's the most curious and interesting is that you can actually get this set up for Walther P99 mags. And that reflects back on one of the cool things about B&T, which is that they are very open to custom orders from specific clients. If a law enforcement agency says, like, we want to order 50 guns, but we need them to use, say, P99 mags, because that's the pistol that we issue, most companies would just send them back a listing of offered products. B&T will actually just make a version of the gun for P99 mags. The one other specific version that I want to show you guys, because it's cool and it is a little bit more different, is the SD version. So this, instead of using the standard extrusion as a handguard all the way up, they cut the receiver extrusion back here and underneath and down, and then use a separate extrusion that is large enough in diameter that you can not only nest an over-the-barrel telescoping suppressor on it. So that's the full suppressor length, and it has a ported barrel back here, like an MP5 SD. But you also have actual usable M-lock. So there's enough space around the diameter of the suppressor that you can put on rails, or you could direct attach lights, lasers, anything else like that to the handguard. So this one right here, I think, is perhaps the best example of combining the modularity as well as B&T's willingness to do custom work for customers. So this was designed to spec for a law enforcement agency that wanted extended charging handles, not the regular ones, but longer ones. They also wanted their own custom barrel length, which is like 12.1 inches. The standard, by the way, is 4.3, 6.9, 8.9, or 16 inch. Or I think they did like an 18 point something for Canada at one point. At any rate, this police agency, none of those worked for them. They wanted specifically 305 millimeter with a flash hider on it. They wanted the handguard made longer to match. And by the way, this is super easy to do because the receiver is an extrusion. So they just cut a piece a little bit longer instead of having a normal handguard back here. Just extend it out a couple more slots. It then has a Glock magazine well receiver. It has an extended bolt release. Like every feature on this gun has to be just a little bit different to make this one unnamed police department happy with it. And that's an option. And here's the result. And last but not least, once you've gotten modular on all the components, then the next step is to, of course, offer different colors, which they now do. So here's an example of one all in essentially coyote tan. This one even also has an aluminum lower, which is not really standard. It's a thing they did a limited run of. We'll get into this in another video, but this whole system was the basis for B&T's 5.56 and 308 caliber rifles, which are of course locked breech guns. The 308s all use aluminum lowers. So they do occasionally make a limited run of aluminum lowers for some of the other guns like the APC. Today, the APC-9 remains on the market as both a select fire military and police weapon and as a semi-automatic civilian weapon. It's sold in the United States and in Europe both. They're manufactured in the United States by B&T USA, so there isn't an importation issue. They're available, like the modularity has really taken off on this. There's a variety of different stocks. There are like 5 different calibers available, essentially all of the major service calibers. So the original was 9mm, but then also 45, 40 Smith & Wesson, 10mm, 357 SIG, like all the standard calibers. And they've actually been adopted by a really substantial number of both American police departments and international police and military organizations. So it's pretty cool to see a gun that, in a way, is doing a pretty good job of taking on the MP5 in like military, police, and carbine shooter markets. Hopefully you guys enjoyed taking a look at this yourself. Hopefully it's given you a little bit of a better understanding of what the APC is. B&T has a lot of different 3-letter named things that are built on very similar platforms. And my goal here is to sort of help build an understanding of which each of these are and where they came from. So thanks for watching.